Hello and welcome to another episode of the Student Undergraduate Research Experience YouTube program. My name is Nora. I'm the coordinator for undergraduate research here at the University of Saskatchewan. And today we have a wonderful panel of undergraduate students who have all been undergraduate research assistants in some form or another from all kinds of places across campus. And so with us today, we have Vadeji, Nora Ridley, Katie Sofko, Ashton Height, and supported and added to is Alexa Selesky as well. Who did I miss? Did I miss anybody on our panel? I think I'm okay. Okay, what I'm going to do first is that I'm going to go around, and that is pretend we're in a circle, and so Vadeji, Nora, Katie, Ashton, Alexa. That's how we're going to go around. And so what I'd like you to do is introduce who you are, what area of study that you have been taking, and just a little bit about yourself and where you sit in terms of the University of Saskatchewan. So Vadeji, take it away.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Vadeji. I'm in my fourth year of bioinformatics, and I've taken part in student research at the university since the summer of going into my third year, throughout my third year, and now my fourth year, especially in computer science and bioinformatics, particularly in developing deep learning models to predict phenotypes from genomic data related to plants or bacteria. I really enjoy research. I think it's like an extended learning process outside the classroom. I think it's something that all students should definitely consider the opportunity of taking part of. And I think it's just a cool place to discover what you're interested in, but also a bit about yourself. So excited to be here.
Thanks, Vadeji. Nora.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Nora. I'm a fourth year computer science student, but I'm currently on an internship with the Plant Phenotyping and Imaging Research Center. So I'm going to be doing that for kind of the next 11 months. I also have been a summer research student in the cybersecurity lab for the last 2 summers. So the first summer I worked remotely, and then the second summer I worked actually in person. So I do have some perspective on kind of both of those, how they differ and how they're the same. So yeah.
Impressive. Thank you, Katie. Sorry, Nora. And Katie, you're next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie. I'm a third year mechanical engineering student, and I've been doing research since January of my second year and worked through the summer, and I'm continuing to work through this year. So I do research with one of the professors in the mechanical engineering department, looking at how we can use quantitative MRI to look at the tibial articular cartilage of the knee.
Thank you so much. Ashton.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ashton Height. I'm a fourth year physiology and pharmacology student. I just started doing undergraduate research this past summer, and I've continued that on through an honors project and as a research assistant this year. I am a phys pharm student, but I am conducting research in behavioral neuroscience, and we're utilizing behavioral tasks in rats to characterize the neural circuitry that undermines these tasks.
And in case you want to hear more about that, we have Ashton. We have a profile that our group did of Ashton that's up on our website. I can put a link in. Alexa.
Absolutely. So I'm actually the student assistant with the Undergraduate Research Initiative. So I get to work alongside the lovely Merle, but I am a research student as well. I started research in September of my third year, I guess. I'm in my last semester of my degree in the area of organizational behavior. So I am an HR major. So I've had the opportunity to work as a TA and an RA in this sector, helping students conducting some additional research in different areas. And it's definitely been one of the most beneficial things I decided to do. It's great supplementary learning to my coursework, and it's why I'm here today. So yeah.
I'm so lucky. Thank you so much for everyone for being here. Okay, now this is the biggest question. This is the one that students ask me all the time. How do I get a research position? How do I land a research job? And we're gonna go in the same order. Vadeji, how did you land yours?
So the one I'm currently in right now, it started off through summer research. And so for that, because I'm a student in the Department of Computer Science, every year in January, they send out these, or even before that, they send out these calls for, hey, we're looking for summer research students, and then some of the projects and professors that are there. So it was essentially a simple form that I filled out, hi, I'm interested. And then that's how I started research. And then after that, once you kind of get into that network of projects that are going on, you can, through different projects and presentations that you hear of other people, you're like, oh, I want to go on that project. And then you like email the person that's part of that project. And so I think initially it would be good to figure out if your department has like different structures that offer research, and get at least get the information pamphlets. You don't need to sign up for everything, but getting that information was key for me.
Fantastic. Nora, how about you? How did you land your first job?
So it definitely was a series of like happy accidents for me. The computer science department did put out a call for volunteers, I don't know, during the summer sometime, and I had like submitted my name, and I think my name had gotten passed on to Natalia, who ended up being my supervisor, because she was looking for instructors to help her start up her Cyber Launch Academy program, which is just a program that teaches computer science to kids through interactive technology. So I worked as an instructor over the fall and winter terms, and then also applied for the NSERC USRAs in the kind of the January, February time of the year. And Natalia agreed to support my application. So I was able to do that with her during the summer. And then obviously the second year, because as like he was saying, you have that network and you have that relationship with those profs, it's a lot easier to kind of get in there once you have your foot in the door. So yeah, I think my second year, I just really emailed Natalia and asked if she'd be willing to support my application once again. And so I guess the moral of the story is just volunteer, because you never really know where that's actually going to take you.
Thank you so much. Katie, how about you?
So in the College of Engineering, they have this email they send out every September, and it's about the Goodfellow Award, which is an opportunity for students to get involved with faculty-led research over the course of the winter semester. So when I got the email at the beginning of my second year, I thought, you know, this seems really cool. I'd like to see if I like research. It's a nice, easy, like just one term. I have no commitment here. It's no big deal. And so I went through the list of engineering professors, and I found the professor I work for now, and I thought the research she did was really cool. So I basically cold emailed her, and she said, sure, let's have a meeting. I've had a student go through this before, so I'm interested in seeing what you have to say. So I met with her, and she said, okay, let's apply for the Goodfellow Award. And then said, do you maybe want to apply for an NSERC with me in January? And I was like, I don't know what an NSERC is, but like, maybe, I guess. So I went through the Goodfellow Award application process, and I got it. So I started working for her in January, and she said, all right, we're going to apply. They had an info night in mechanical. So finally I knew what the NSERC was. So we applied for one, and then I worked for her throughout the summer, and I'm now continuing to work for her throughout the year. So it all happened. I took the first step, but from there I was kind of along for the ride. So it was great.
I think that's just brilliant. Thank you so much. Ashton, how about you? How did you land yours?
So part of my story is pretty similar to Katie's in that it involved some cold emailing. But basically what I did is I took a look at the physiology faculty's website. I looked at all the researchers, and just kind of went, I narrowed it down to like 3 to 5 researchers that I thought were in cool areas. I read through some of their literature, and I believe 3 researchers I actually reached out to, ended up meeting with all 3, and then I settled on working with Dr. John Howland in his lab. So he took me through a walkthrough of the lab, and like immediately once I saw it, I fell in love with it. So I decided to work with him. But yeah, so I did the whole NSERC USRA thing throughout the summer, and then I decided to continue on with an honors degree through Dr. Howland's lab. I have noticed that it is pretty common in the College of Medicine that the researchers like to have, if you're starting in the summer, they generally like to have you continue through an honors, because you can, the nature of a lot of the research projects is they do require a great time commitment. So it gives you that opportunity.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. How about you, Alexa? How did you land yours?
Okay, so mine is a little bit of a different story. Being that I'm in commerce, I really didn't know that research was an option for us. I was more familiar with it in the health-related professions and sciences. And I signed up for a class called leadership because I've always been interested in, the gender indifference. I'm all about women's rights. Women and gender studies really fascinated me, and this leadership class really aligned for me. So I started taking it, and I was a student that put up their hand a lot, and I was really passionate about the assignments I was doing. And one night I received an email from my professor, Erica Carlton, and it said, "Could you please come meet me in my office after class tomorrow?" And I thought, I'm totally in trouble. Like, what did I do? Like, oh my gosh, I was shaking in my boots. But then when I opened the door and sat down with her, she said, me and a colleague have an opportunity to take on 2 research students, and we were wondering if you would be interested. And I would say I was a good student, but I'm definitely not an exceptional student in marks wise. I definitely have to work really hard. So I was absolutely shocked, but I knew it was an opportunity I had to take because this was the way I could really, work on my interests. And then from there, I started with an honors project all last year. I wrote my own thesis and was able to present it for a big panel of industry specific researchers as well. And then they carried me over into a research position as an assistant, working on some other papers, and it just kind of spiraled into lots of different opportunities. So that's kind of my story of how I got to research.
That's fantastic. And you guys all come at it from a little bit different. Sometimes you're paying attention to the emails that the department sends out or the opportunities in your department. Sometimes it came through your classes. Sometimes you just went, okay, I want to do this, and went out and found it yourself. So that combination of cold calling and paying attention and building your network. So you've all brought a lot to the table, and thank you for that. So the next biggest question that students ask all the time is, how much did your marks matter? And we're going to reverse it. We're going to start with Alexa this time around, because you're the only one that kind of touched on this at least a little bit. So we're going to start with Alexa, and then we'll go to Ashton and back up the other way.
Absolutely. I find this question really interesting. And I tell students that if you're a hard worker, research is for you. I'm passionate about school, and I always have been, but there's certain subjects, especially in my degree, that just were not it for me, such as accounting and finance and stats and things like that. So those would not be reflective of my knowledge, whereas some of the classes I was really interested in, it showed. And so I wouldn't say I'm an exceptional student. I would say I'm a good student that works really hard. And my professors saw that. The transcript really didn't hold much weight, they said, marks wise, but rather just seeing what understanding I had, what courses I had already taken that would kind of cross over into my research area. But it definitely takes a lot of hard work, but don't let those grades hold you back. You really just got to take your shot at it.
Super. Ashton, how about you? Did your marks ever come into it at all?
So with research within the biomedical sciences, kind of a pattern that I've come across is marks are kind of a thing that get your foot in the door, but they don't really determine your success within research. So commonly one of the first questions that a professor will ask you is just, what are your marks like? Because they, it's a competitive field. So there's lots of smart people. So, they're gonna take people who are smart, obviously. But once you're actually in the door, I wouldn't say it's not as much about what your marks are like that's going to determine your success. It's how hard you're going to work. Are you creative? Can you think outside the box? Can you work well with others? Those are kind of more important for determining your success, I would say.
Super. Katie, how about you? What's been your experience?
So for me, I'd say marks are nice because when applying for an NSERC, it's a very competitive award. So, I mean, any prof, I'm sure, will take funding, So I think it's certainly nice to have, and it's something you should say if you do have quite high marks, just so they know, okay, we can apply for an NSERC, and that's good to know. But I don't think it's the most important thing. When talking to a prof about potentially doing research for them, I think it's more important to have enthusiasm, show you're willing to work hard, and have a real passion for and interest in their area of research. And I think that gets you a lot further, because a lot of profs aren't necessarily expecting to get funding. It's just a nice thing to come with it.
Thank you. Nora, how about you? Have marks played much of a role in your world?
They have to an extent. Like Ashton said, it is like marks do kind of get you in the door. For the award that I applied for, which was the NSERC USRA, it is quite competitive. So marks do matter, but it's also partially the research contribution that you can potentially be contributing to your field, so that when you apply for your NSERC, yes, you submit your transcript, but your supervisor also submits a proposal of sorts about what you might be working on during the summer. So marks are important, but I don't think you should ever be like, oh, my marks aren't above a certain threshold, so I shouldn't at least even like try. Because even if you try and you don't get the award, but you show enthusiasm or you show that you really are interested in the work and the prof remembers that, other opportunities might come along with that prof. So yeah, I think kind of the takeaway is just be really engaged and be really interested and ask questions. And sometimes that will take you a lot further than just having like 90s and everything.
Fair enough. What about you, Vadeji? Have marks been a thing? Has anyone considered that?
I remember when I first went to go meet the professor I worked with for my first NSERC USRA, and I was like waiting for the moment he was going to look at my transcript, and it was like, it could become a movie moment. I think there was just so much anxiety in it, but it actually doesn't play that big of a role. I think, just to reiterate what everyone has said, it is important when applying for the NSERC USRA because that's a metric that they use when giving out grants. So it is something that professors, with my experience, do consider because that's one way to get funding. But when I think of like the key, like the ingredients to having a meaningful research experience, I think that marks are not, they don't really paint the whole picture. It's your interest, it's your passion, how driven you are, how much you're willing to think creatively and critically about what you're encountering. So marks can be one way to reflect knowledge, but I don't think that they're the only way. And I would say it shouldn't be the factor that should ever hold you back. And also, if you do find that your marks aren't somewhere where you'd like them to be, I think it's okay to be honest with the professor that you're seeking to work with and explain what life situation led to that. And I think like expressing that human element is also okay and should be encouraged.
I can't nod my head enough on that one, because absolutely, faculty have made that very, very clear that one of the other reasons that they'll look at your transcripts is because they're looking at not your marks, your class choices. They want to make sure that you've taken a couple of classes that happen to be important to help their lab, or they want to see the breadth of the kind of classes that you've taken, you know, in your journey through university. So transcripts tell a larger story than just your marks. So do keep that in mind. So if a professor is looking for your transcripts, they might not necessarily be looking specifically at your marks. They might be looking at something else. Another thing is that the SURE program itself also shows up on your transcript, right? So it is a co-curricular program. If you have completed and you've been awarded a co-curricular record because you've been through SURE, let's say this past summer, then that also shows up on your transcript, which is a way to indicate at least your interest in research and your interest in learning more about how to do research well. So it's not because you're a fully trained researcher because you did 10 hours of the SURE program. No, you're not. But you know, it at least indicates that you have an interest in this particular field. All right. So from here, I want you guys to kind of close your eyes and think back those first 1 to 2 weeks. Here you are, you were all of a sudden, you weren't a student anymore, you were a researcher and you had a research project. Tell me about those first 2 weeks and the switch from being a student to being a researcher. Vadeji, you can go first.
That's a good question, because I think when I stepped to the door of like formal university research, I did it in high school, but I thought that coming into university, doing university level research would be like me walking through a door and suddenly I'd leave my like student jacket outside and walk through and become a researcher. And I actually think now, reflecting, being a student and a researcher is almost like being in the same boat, because it's part of learning and discovering. It's part of critically thinking about what knowledge that is there and asking questions. So I think that the skills you bring as a student are invaluable to being a researcher. Having that ability to teach yourself something, the capacity to learn new skills, and the capacity to question. So all the things that you work on like in your daily life as a student are the things that are also needed for research and to do good research. So don't think of them as too different. I think that being a researcher is an extension of being a student. It's almost like committing to being a lifelong learner in one type of capacity.
Nora, how about you? How was your switch from being a student into being a researcher?
Yeah, so my experience in the first 1 and 2 weeks of my first year summer of research was very different from my second research experience. My second research, I was familiar with the people, even if I had only met them remotely. I was really excited. The second transition into my summer research was very nice. My first year was very different because, I was coming in as a student when, especially in computer science, you're given very concrete specifications for the kind of problems you're supposed to solve in your schoolwork. So, you come in and you are told that you need to write a program or write this specific thing, and you need to output this specific thing. Research is very different from that. There's a lot more discussing. There's a lot more like, I have an idea of what we might want to do, but I don't actually have that solution. And I don't actually have the way that we should actually go about that solution. So that can be really intimidating because it is such a switch. I also found that, imposter syndrome is very real. And, even if you get your award and you get the funding and you get into the lab as the researcher, there's still so much you don't know. And I think it's sometimes hard to convince yourself that you do deserve to be there. I think my first 1 to 2 weeks, my most commonly used phrase was like, well, I don't know that, I'm still learning, or like, I'm only a second year. And you kind of need to just stop that and just own that you don't know that much, but the people that you're working with aren't expecting you to solve like an open problem in your field as soon as you get into the lab. So I think, just being able to realize that you don't know stuff and that's okay, and that you're not getting graded, which is something that as students we really have in our heads, is like, we're getting marked on this, and that's not the case with research. So there's a lot of other ways you could prove who you are as a person and as a researcher beyond just knowing the answer all the time.
That was a really, really rich discussion. Thank you so much, Nora. Katie, how about you? How was your transition into the research world as a new student?
So I think mine might have been a bit of an easier transition because I was a student while I was being a researcher for the second term of my second year. So I wasn't doing research every day for a set number of hours. It was 4 hours a week whenever I could fit it in. So I found that pretty relaxed. I was learning new skills. I was having meetings. I was reading journals. I was just learning a lot of things along with my classes. So it was almost a break from my classes because it was something different, but I was being handed tasks to do every week. My first 2 weeks in the summer doing research full-time was very different than that. The professor I work for went on vacation for the first 2 weeks for sure the first week, if not the first 2 weeks that I was working. So she said, here, these are the things you have to work on. Go at it, which was a completely different experience because I had been used to being given something each week. So to start off with, it was all right because I was just doing some of the lab training, going through a few things. But one of my tasks was to go through all the code for my project to understand what it meant, because we were having an issue with some of the data that we hadn't been able to track down yet. I have never experienced patience such as when I sat for 3 days in a row, scrolling through function after function, trying to find the original one so I could work my way back out while writing notes down what each one was in. I understand the value of commenting your code because there were no comments in this code. I had to go line by line, figure out what was happening. So that was probably the biggest shock to my system, is like, you have to just sit down and figure it out, and it will take you days, and that's fine. You can stare at one line of code for an hour if that's what it takes for you to understand what's going on. So I guess the amount of time things took is what I really learned in those first 2 weeks, and that it was fine. it was okay that it took that long. So
That's a brilliant story. I'm a historian, so that just frightens me. Like, code, what? But you guys are all amazing. Ashton, how about you? How was your transition into, from a student receiving instruction to a researcher actually making it work?
Yeah, so my first 2 weeks were not quite as involved nor stressful as Katie's sounded like. But I was pretty lucky in the sense that when I came into the lab, first of all, I was able to be in person, which was a huge benefit for the time. And then what I was doing for the first couple of weeks, I was just shadowing a few PhD students. I was following them around, just kind of learning what they were doing, different lab techniques. They were super personable people, super good to be around. So they helped me quite a bit. And I did come in at a pretty a lucky time. We had quite a bit of cool stuff going on. So I know my first day I was slicing up brains already and putting them on slides and stuff in my first day. And then I got to watch some rats being smoked by cannabis. There's just a bunch of cool stuff going on. So it was an awesome transition.
How about you, Alexa? What do you think of that switch?
Mine is extremely different than Ashton's. I definitely had no contact with any brains, but the first 2 weeks I was actually doing my honors. I was a research assistant and a TA all at once. And so when they put this on my plate, I was like, okay, like just like anything, I'm going to figure it out. And there was definitely a learning curve when they sent me the data and I had to download software and start looking through all this data, all these coded names, things like that. I thought, oh my God, they said that you needed a stats background, but like, I don't know anything that's going on. So I was so shocked. And then they gave me some time to, read some articles, and they gave me some direction. And you know what? My direct supervisor, Megan Walsh, was absolutely fantastic. She met with me every week. We talked through things, but then it came the time that she said to me, and this was all in 2 weeks, she said, okay, so what do you think you want to write about? And I had no idea. I did, but I guess not in scientific terms. So I gave her this roundabout explanation of what I thought I wanted my thesis to be and this and that. And she was like, you know what? Yeah, we can do it. And I was like, hey, okay. And that gave me the confidence to kind of have my own voice and to understand that they knew where I was coming from because they once were in the same position. Yes, I might be clueless and maybe I'm not using the right terms. Yes, but it will all come. And it really did. And having those conversations, like Nora said, is just part of the job. You're going to bounce ideas off each other. You're going to have to ask difficult questions. You're going to have to admit sometimes that you don't know what you're doing, but that's all part of the process. And so the 2 weeks were a learning curve. Definitely felt the imposter syndrome. Felt like, how and why am I here? Like there's got to be a zillion other students they could have picked from. But in the end, I understood why I was there. And we definitely worked good as a team. So yeah.
I think that's absolutely brilliant. And you all had a slightly different experience in terms of your transition from into becoming a researcher. And yes, it takes time. And yes, it's a shift in your mind power. Yes, you're bringing in your skills, as Vadeji said, of being constantly interested and a lifelong learner, but you're still switching it another way. As Nora said, and if in a lab situation where it's like, okay, here's the ingredients and you have to come out with this, right? And you're measured on how well you can come out with this. That's not how it works in research. It's like, here's our problem. How are we going to solve it? What are we going to do? What are we going to set up as our research? So it flips the whole thing upside down and comes at it from a different way. So I wanted to open it up to those students who are here. I'm going to watch the chat. So if you have particular questions that you'd like me to ask, please go ahead and put them into the chat. But while we're waiting for you guys to start doing that, I want to do a lightning round around two things. So number one, your worst day as a researcher and what happened, and your best day as a researcher on what happened. Take a couple seconds to think about that. And it could be something that happened in the lab, it could, or in your research, it could be something, maybe you had an internal switch where you finally shoved imposter syndrome away, whatever it was, your worst day and your best day. And we're gonna blow it out of the water and I'm just gonna pick. So Katie.
Good thing I thought very fast. So mine, I have to start with the good day because it came first. My best day was, I think, a month and a half into my research this past summer when I found the singular line of code that was causing the entire problem with my data. It was erasing too much of the T2 maps, so all of the data was just being gotten rid of by one singular line of code in I don't know how many lines of code. So that was definitely my best day because I had figured something out. I was on the road because it was a real stopper in my project. Like I couldn't get any further if these maps weren't showing data. So I was very excited when I finally found it. My worst day would probably be when I thought I had solved that problem after spending weeks on it, and then was going through all my T2 maps again and found that too much data was still being removed. So that was a pretty terrible day because I had already talked to my prof about it. I thought it was working. There's like 30 knees that I'm going through. Like there's a lot. And then as I was rerunning it all, I was realizing it was not fixed yet. So that was probably my worst day.
It's like, what do the teachers tell you that a fail is? It's first attempt at learning or first attempt in learning? Yeah.
Well, it was my fifth attempt and then there was like 10 more. So no.
All right, fantastic. Ashton, best day, worst day?
So keeping with the chronological pattern, I'll go with my worst day to start. Basically, long story short, what happened is that a rat I was handling, we were doing a task where it involves them being placed in a touchscreen chamber. And upon removing this rat, somehow it managed to wedge its tail between the wall and the floor of the chamber it was in. It got scared, I believe, when I opened up the chamber, and I think it jumped, causing about 2 inches of the skin on its tail to be pulled off, so the bone was exposing. So anyways, long story short, we ended up rushing the rat down. Thank goodness we have a great lab tech on our team because he was able to do an emergency surgery and amputate and cauterize the tail. So that rat's name now is Stubby, since he's got a short tail, but he's still kicking. And then best day actually was probably yesterday in the lab. I performed my first real chemical manipulation to the rats that I'm working on in our behavioral task, and the data ended up turning out a lot better than I was expecting. So I was pretty happy with that. So
that's fantastic. Best day, worst day. I think that's awesome. Nora, how about you? Best day, worst day?
Yeah, so my worst day was kind of a worst week, honestly. I know that doesn't sound super promising, but I was working on code, and essentially what I was trying to do is make sure that at every point the numbers were adding up, and like so that you can check that your logic is correct on the code you're writing. And yeah, for that entire week my numbers did not add up. I was continually crashing my computer. I was definitely very frustrated and felt really like not discouraged necessarily, but very like, is this what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my summer? Like, am I going to like spend so much time on this that like this is like the only thing I'll be able to do? It was kind of a funny story at the end because my like direct supervisor was kind of like, well, yes, you went the wrong way at counting. You went from like the top down and you needed to go from the bottom up. And he's like, you had to learn that on your own, because if you didn't, if we just told you, you'd be like, no, that doesn't make sense. He's like, you had to deal with the week-long code extravaganza. So I definitely feel Katie's pain when she's talking about the like, just digging through code and being like, I don't know. And then my best day, it's not actually a specific day, but kind of the days that I really think about and like really remember really fondly is being in the lab and just being able to talk with my lab mates about a project. So either we'd be talking about the project I was working on, and my direct supervisor would be giving us kind of like an impromptu lesson on some of the concepts, and we'd be friendly arguing about like what approach to take, or why are we doing it that way, like or why does like the industry do this approach, and what are the reasons for that. And so kind of just any day where I got to just really talk to my lab mates and do that kind of that collaborative process was just a really like wonderful experience.
I think that that's just brilliant. But yes, most students tell me, especially when they happen to be in a situation where there are others, or that there's graduate students and PhDs and postdocs, kind of a really big mix in the lab, that the learning that happens, not just because between you and your supervisor, but between all of you in the lab is a big part of what students take forward. So thank you very much for that. Vadeji, best day, worst day?
I had to think of this one because when I think of like worst day, best day, because most of the research experiences I've had have been remote, it seems like the time is dragged out more. So I would say like worst weeks, best weeks. But I'd say worst weeks were, it was at the start of my first summer research internship last year, where similar to the experience I shared, I was trying to start running these models, but it's not just one code file, it's like this folder of code files. So there's several of them. And once I was like, okay, I think I understand these code files. I'm trying to run them. And then when you run someone else's code or code that has been worked on by multiple different teams, you're trying to build this environment to run that code in. And that environment has really like specific specifications. It's like you're building a house and you need to ensure the sofa is in that exact same corner and the light has that like specific light bulb. So constantly you're trying to update that environment to get to that specification. So I would run the model wouldn't even start. So I'd like change something else about the house, etc. Right? Going back and forth, and then it would be like model would run halfway but not complete, so you go back and change it. And it was this like, it was the first time that I ever built an environment, because before in my computer science assignments it would be like very straightforward, all the environment specifications would be given to you, but here it was like almost decoding something. So it was like a huge learning curve and experience. But once I got used to that idea of like running up against a wall or expecting it and not being afraid of what that meant, then that's where like the real fun started. And like the professor I worked with and I had, like, we now laugh over that experience because it was such a cool learning experience for the both of us. And it was something that taught me a lot versus if it would have gone smoothly. And then I would say my best days were definitely when that model ran. I like sat through watching the whole model run. I was so happy. But also like being able to bring ideas and understand different conversations. So like weekly, the professor I work with, we meet, and initially it would be so difficult to understand what was going on in the meeting. Like I would be taking rapid notes, being like, what is happening? What do these words mean? And doing like a Google search for hours afterward. But now getting to a point where I can bring forward ideas or bounce back questions with what is said right away. There's something really satisfying about applying your learning from the classroom and things you've taken the time to learn outside the classroom and put it together, like seeing your own growth as a person and a scientist. And then also this summer, I got to go into the lab. And so being able to talk to people within that lab in the bioinformatics field was really fascinating, because as I'm approaching the end of undergrad, to see what people have done with their research journeys and masters or PhDs or outside of the university was like some of the best days. So not directly related to the project, but being able to bounce off your project like that, I think is where cool interactions take place.
I think that that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Vadeji. It is. What's the thing about research is that even when you're doing it on your own, the minute you do a literature search, you're automatically doing, it's a group effort, right? Because you're seeing what everybody else has done so far and then building on that, right? And taking it in a new direction, finding your own hole, whatever it is. So even me as a historian, I tend to be by myself in an archive going through stuff, but at the same time, I'm still interacting with whatever it is that I'm working with. So there's no such thing as research in a vacuum, and being able to share that research and learn from other people is really important. I did have a question that came in privately on the chat. We have a computer science second year student, definitely wants to get into research. Since I have several of you that have kind of worked in and around computer science, can you give some hints and tips as to how to get into research?
I can start. So I would say, if you've declared your major as computer science, look out for those computer science emails that do come around. And I'm fairly certain that one comes around in December and it will say, If you're interested in doing an NSERC USRA or a summer research project, fill out this Google form. And in that Google form, it'll be like filling out your basic student information and then clicking project areas that you are interested in. And then you will be contacted with further information. So I would say that's like a good first place to start if you are just looking for like a general research experience and aren't very sure. And then I guess if you are very sure of where you're interested in, then I would cold email all the people that you're interested in and be genuinely interested and say you're a second year student, and then see where that takes you.
And just to add to that too, so yeah, like what Vadeji said about emailing like the people that you're potentially interested in or like interested in the research, and you don't have to decide that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. For me, like I did not know anything about cybersecurity when Natalia like asked if I was like wanting to like, work in her lab over the summer. But I was interested enough in, her work, and I just was like, well, why not give it a shot? So I think you shouldn't let that idea of I need to like be absolutely like super knowledgeable about this, or I need to be very sure that this is exactly what I want to do, because it at worst is 4 months out of your life, and you don't have to marry that topic. So just give it a shot.
Sorry, I had something going. I was going to send a thank you very much for that, by the way. So Undergraduate Research Experience Initiative, my office has been doing a whole bunch of videos around this very topic. So a couple of weeks ago, we did a video around, first of all, the research landscape at USask. So if you don't know what NSERC stands for or how professors get their money, I recommend to watch that one. NSERC stands for National Sciences and Engineering Research Council. It's one of the three major arm's length Canadian federal funding agencies. So NSERC is Natural Science and Engineering. Then we have SSHRC, which is Social Sciences and Humanities. So that's where historians tend to get their money. And then there's the Canadian Institutes for Health Research. So that's where health scientists go to get funding. So those are the three largest baskets of funding. But of those, the only one that actually specifically supports undergraduate students is NSERC. And so NSERC has the USRA awards, which are moving to my office. So anybody who's applying for an NSERC for next summer, those are going to come through my office. So they're moving to my office from the College of Graduate Studies. So piece of information for you. But the Agnes and Iabasan has said, how do you find research jobs online? What websites do you go to find these? And also, and Agnes said, how do you approach a potential supervisor without knowing exactly what you want to do research on? And how do you approach or impress a professor that you've never met before? So if any of you, and Ashton, I think this is a good example for you, I think, that you did some cold emailing. So if you wanted to talk, and any of the rest of you can jump in as well.
Yeah, I could take a stab at this. So I think one of the most important things to realize is, as an undergraduate, when you are applying for a research job, not every professor is going to expect you to kind of have a specific project in mind. They're oftentimes going to have kind of projects lined up that are going to piggyback off their current work. So that's oftentimes where the role of an undergraduate researcher comes in. So you're not always going to be expected to know exactly what you want to do, just as long as you kind of have a general idea of the field, I guess. And then how to impress a professor that you've never met. I didn't know any of the professors before that when I emailed them. So basically what I did is I just took a look at what kind of research areas their group is working on. And I looked at some of the primary literature that they had published in recent time. I read through that, and I just kind of brought up a couple points on those papers when I emailed them. And I think this just kind of shows them that you are interested in their work and that you are willing to take the time to kind of learn what they're doing. So yeah, that's kind of what I got.
Does anyone else want to jump in?
I can speak a little, I guess, to the without knowing exactly what you want to do research on. So of course, obviously going through the list of professors, if there's just areas that you know you're not interested in doing and areas that you're kind of interested in doing, that's really important to see which profs do what, because you don't want to just randomly email a prof for no reason. But I think what is also really important when you're approaching a supervisor is seeing what you can find about what they're like as a supervisor, and if you want to work with them. We have some really fantastic supervisors at the university, and it's important to see, you know, things like this. If you hear a professor's name and you think, oh, this person had an awesome experience with them, maybe I should see if they're willing to take on another undergrad student or something like that. I think that can be really helpful in guiding you towards a research area that you might not have initially been interested in. Just knowing that someone had a really good experience with that prof, or you had them for a class and they seem like they'd be super awesome to work with. I think that's a really good way to help you decide potentially on a research area that you want to pursue.
So last week we had a faculty panel. So basically just like this, but faculty who supervise students, undergraduate students, and why they supervise, why they like to have undergraduate students. And one of the things that faculty tell me, especially if they're brand new faculty, is that they actually have a hard time finding and connecting with students. If they're new, they might not be teaching in their first year, but they still need to get their research program off the ground. So they'll go in and they'll do guest lectures and stuff like that, you know, for various other, colleagues, and they'll literally ask, they'll be like, by the way, I'm searching for students, so pay attention in class. So I've had lots of students over the past couple of years that I've been in this position tell me that that's how they landed their job, is that a professor was in class and said, by the way, I just want a research grant, I need people, ears open, read all your emails to the bottom, check your department websites. If the University of Saskatchewan has just put out a, so-and-so in your field has just won a big research grant, by all means run and check on them and see if they need, because they need people to action their research. I mean, historians, we're kind of individual, but everybody else, needs a lot of people to action a research project. So,
and this is a big this is a big business term, but networking is very important. And I know that I've even had students on LinkedIn or Instagram who are interested in research reach out to me and just ask me how I did it, how I got there, and if I have any connections for them or any advice. And I think shaking hands, and if you know a student that's done research before, approach them. We love talking. We're not going to say no. We're not going to turn you away. So I'm pushing the networking stance, but definitely take advantage.
I would say something.
Oh, go ahead, Vadeji.
And something else would be to also reflect on your interests outside of school. So the fact that you're looking for research, it indicates that, and research particularly in whatever field you're studying in, indicates that you have some interest or connection to that. So I would draw on that academic connection, but also on the connections outside. When I think of the research experiences I've undertaken, it's because I'm really interested in that field outside of school. There's a community project or an impact that drives me to take part in that research. So I would really reflect on what those interests are. And then maybe if you came across an article that involved the supervisor, or you read a paper or a newspaper article and it really interests you, I would bring those points in, not only into the email, but into the conversations you have with them, because that's a way to demonstrate genuine interest. And I think that's one of the biggest things that professors are looking for when looking for students, is that genuine interest, because that will sustain throughout the project. So really draw on your non-academic interests too, because they're just as important.
Absolutely. I think that that's a really great thing to add, Vadeji. Thank you. And the other thing is that think outside the university as well. So other universities, research, big, if you're in political studies, maybe you want to go work for a think tank for a summer. If you're a scientist and you want to go work at a hospital that's got a bit of a research program going, lots of them do. If you want to travel overseas and go work at CERN or something, go ahead, by all means, apply for everything. And another thing is to remember that, say, the government of Canada is an excellent place to land, particularly summer jobs. They hire an enormous number of students. They have a lot of programs for businesses to get money to hire students as well. Some of those might not necessarily be as much research focused, but they're definitely project focused. And there's a lot of crossover between the two. So don't limit yourself to just working on campus with faculty, because those actually might end up being the least paid well-paid jobs that you can land. You're not going to get rich being a summer researcher working on campus. I can tell you that right now. But at the same time, the experience is very invaluable. So do keep that in mind. Agnes has a question. How can we find the professors' websites on the university faculty list? Yeah, so go University of Saskatchewan, and then if you know the name of the professor, just put their name in there. There's actually a search function, and then usually that will pop up there. Each faculty member has their own page. Usually lists a lot of their publications, all kinds of things, and their research interests, and how much money they've if they have a recent grant. So definitely, if you want to be a researcher, the best way to showcase your research skills is to do your research. That may sound a little weird, but it does. Like the more research you do, knowing what faculty members you might want to work with, who's doing research you're interested in, the better you can do your research to figure out where you want to go, the better you can be your own guide on this. I think that, yeah, so yes, you're welcome. And what websites would be the best to look at while looking for research jobs? So I have kind of collected a number of research opportunities, both on campus and off, on my undergraduate research website, which I run. And so under opportunities and funding, there's a whole bunch of links, particularly under research assistantships, and funding. And so by all means, check out there, but don't limit yourself to that. Being out there and cold calling, cold emailing a prof actually lands a lot of students their first position. So don't be afraid to do that. And I did showcase one of the webinars that we did a couple weeks ago around how to do that really well, how to do that cold call email and make sure that you have enough information that it's just like, hey, prof, yeah, I want to, do you have a job? You're not going to get anywhere with that. So I do kind of break it down and teach you a few better ways to do that. So yes, I can put the link for that as well. So we have a whole bunch of videos on our undergraduate research channel, and I highly recommend for you guys to watch any and all of them that appeal. I'm going to put it in the chat for everyone. And that's the link to the whole channel. And there's lots of things there, but the one specifically it's called Landing an Undergraduate Research Position, How to Approach a Professor. So I recommend to watch that one. All right, it's 4:22. I want to open the floor to any final thoughts and any final questions. Is there any of my panelists, is there any final thought that you would like to tell someone who's thinking about maybe applying for research and they're shy? What's the one thing you want them to know?
I can go. I think the main thing is to go into the research experience. So first of all, before you even look at getting the research experience, realize that it might really change the course of your life, and that can be really exciting because I was not interested in not necessarily not interested in cybersecurity, but I didn't know anything about cybersecurity before I started. And it's what I'm interested in now, because I've met people who they really care about cybersecurity, and their knowledge is it's fascinating, and their enthusiasm is just so contagious. And so you can really learn a lot from them. So if you're kind of oh, I don't really know what I'm going to get out of this experience, know that you will get a lot out of it. You just might not expect exactly all of that stuff. And then also, if you treat it more as an experience than a job, I know it is a job in the sense that you get paid and you have a set amount of hours, but if you treat it like an experience, you're really going to get a lot more out of it, because you're going to be more willing to, put yourself out there and ask questions and, try and do your best, versus if you're oh, I'm just going to show up for 8 hours and do my work. And that can really lead to some really wonderful outcomes, even within your research position and beyond. So,
well, those are both really, really brilliant. So thank you very much for adding that. Anyone else? Anything that you would really like an incoming undergraduate researcher to know?
Spend time on your data and the steps in your research. There's at the end of a summer, at the end of a project, you have the results, and that's really fun. The professor I like to work for, Dr. Emily McWalter, her favorite example is the Law and Order episode. You collect all of your data for the majority of it, and then the last couple weeks is where you're actually doing the exciting stuff, finding your results. So it's important that you spend the bulk of your summer really understanding your data, knowing what's going on with it, making sure that you think it makes sense and it applies to your project, and this is logical for this reason. The data and the steps to your final product are the most important part of having effective results that you know are correct and that you can feel good presenting or publishing or doing something with.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And that really showcases that the process of data is not just, do the data and then write it up at the end. That's the other thing. You're constantly engaging with what you're doing. It's like this code is not working. Something's going on. And so you're constantly engaging with what you're doing. And it can change. But it kind of goes back to what Nora said about it can change the course of your whole direction. I've seen students take an undergraduate research experience that was maybe a little bit outside, and then all of a sudden they're doing something completely different. They went from physiology, pharmacology, all of a sudden they're in toxicology, and then the next thing you know, they're in medicine, or the next thing you know, they're in WCVM. It can take you in unexpected directions. I think that's a really good lesson in learning. Anything else that anyone wants to add?
I would say to take it as a learning experience and to focus on that process of research, less the results and the anxiousness behind getting the right results. Rather focus on the process of learning, of questioning, of building that procedure, of going through it, and then those what happens next or what do I do now questions, because I think that's where some of the best learning happens. And then also to, at the beginning of your project, to think, what is something about myself that I want to bring to this project? So if science communication really interests you, or a topic within your field really interests you and you want to explore that, try bringing a bit of yourself to your own project, because we're all different in our interests and our passions. And I think if you bring a bit of yourself inside school or outside of school, whatever that might be, that can be one of the best ways to enrich your experience and make it your own. So good luck.
I'm going to build on what Vadeji had to say and just follow your passions. And if you've always had a question in your head and you've been pondering something, I went from being a girl who would read feminist articles to my parents that really didn't care, and idolizing women like Michelle Obama and Brene Brown and Carolyn Taston. And I had all these interests, but I just didn't really know the avenues that were possible for me to kind of enhance my learning and really channel that interest. So definitely see it through. No topic has really out too crazy. There's really research in every area. So don't feel limits, just really hone in on your interests.
That's fantastic. Ashton, we don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have a final thought that you wanted to add in, then please take your opportunity.
Yeah, so I think everyone kind of nailed the question. But I guess what I would say is that even if you have any inkling of an interest at all, you can just at least take the initial steps, meet with the professor, discuss things a little bit, especially with a summer position. It's not a huge time commitment. It's only 4 months. So worst case scenario, you decide that you hate research, and that's also an important life lesson. So there's nothing really negative that can come out of it, I don't think.
I think that's really awesome. We have actually had another question that came in on the chat. Is it hard to get a publication as an undergraduate student? Have any of you published any of your research?
I think it depends on your supervisor and what they're willing to, if they are willing to include you on the paper if you are publishing something. I have found that if you put in a lot of work, or not a lot of work, but if you you do have to put in work, but if you show enthusiasm and interest and you try your best and you ask lots of questions, I think they're a lot more willing to want to help you out, and a way that they can help you out is by putting your name on a paper. So yeah, I think maybe if you really do want to produce a paper, I would talk to your supervisor at the beginning of the summer and say, this is something I really want to do because I think this might help me in the future. I really want to go through the process, and make it clear you're willing to contribute as much as you can. And I think that might be the best way that you can maybe get published as a
just for those of you who may not know, the University of Saskatchewan also has the Undergraduate Research Journal. It's called USurge. And it's all undergraduate student publications. A lot of them come out of classes. So any kind of classwork that you've done around, that's project-based classwork, but summer project work is always welcome and included as well. And so, yeah, that's an excellent first place to go if you have a research project and you've got it all written up and you want to shop around it and get it published. It is peer reviewed. It will stand the same. I mean, it's not going to stand the same stead as science or nature, but it is still an excellent place for a first go at publishing your research. And so I'm going to say that it's not actually that hard to get a publication as an undergraduate student. And also, if you think a little bit more broadly and don't think about publication as just being a journal article in a journal, if you think about publication in terms of attending a symposium or a conference and presenting there, creating a poster, a research poster and presenting it, we do have a new research symposium that is coming up this fall. And so here I am as an advertisement again. So SURE has created an additional research symposium. We've never had one on campus, a campus-wide one in the fall. We have the USSU one in the spring, and we have the summer SURE one at the end of summer, but we've never had one in the fall. And so my office is creating one. It will be online from the end of November to the beginning of through the beginning of September, December. And yeah, so any student that has a finished research project that wants to put it in, they're all welcome, and I recommend that you do so, and I'll tell you why. Even though this has not been yet announced across the University of Saskatchewan, you guys get to hear it from me first. I am leading a group of 4 institutions: University of Saskatchewan, University of Regina, Sask Polytech, and First Nations University. And we are taking a group of about 35 students to the legislature in May of 2022. So our top research students from our 4 top universities get to go to the legislature to present your research to the MLAs. So in order for us to find those students, you guys need to be putting your stuff into the SURE symposium, into those symposiums, so that we can collect those top students and take them with us to Regina. So just so you know, you all have a new goal. So yes, think more broadly about what publication looks like, not just a journal article, but presentations of any kind. And with that, oh my gosh, we're 2 minutes over. Merle, you talk too much. Thank you very much to Vadeji, to Nora, to Katie, to Ashton, and to Alexa for giving us such a wonderful insight and share of your experience as an undergraduate researcher, at your high points, your low points, your tipping points, some of the things that you learned. And thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom with us. And with that, I will let you all go. Thank you. Very helpful. Comments coming in, as you can imagine. I will stop the recording.